Hey everyone! We are pretty late to this, I'm sorry. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 has been out for around Xenoblade Chronicles 3 months. But we're ready! I'm John, and I'm joined by the lovely, stupendous Daniel.
Hello.
And I'm also joined by the deliciously beautiful Brandon.
Oh no.
So first off, an apology. We are going to change how we address these discussions in the future. We want to do them basically when the game's still new, but unfortunately we're waiting on some of the crew to finish the game, but because of commitments, they could never actually do it. So we're going to do it with the panel that finished it within the first week or two. So it's been a while since we properly played the story, but man, this game leaves an impact on you, and I'm sure we'll still remember a bunch of the great moments. So, I want to start off with where we all land in our Xenoblade history. Have we played all the games? How long been part of the broader Xeno saga, or Gears, or whatever? So Brandon, I think you actually catching up a bit before 3, so exactly what's your history with the Xenoblade series?
So I played Xenoblade 2 first, about a year after it came out.
Mm-hmm.
I also got Xenoblade Chronicles 3D on the 3DS, but I only played about 4 or 5 hours of it before throwing in the towel. As impressive as the 3DS version is, I don't think it's the best way maybe to play that game.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, I did catch up on Xenoblade Chronicles 1, and I beat it, I think, the day Xenoblade 3 came out. Just in time.
Just to add to this, you were telling me that you were at Prison Island, and I was like, man, he's got so much of the game to go. That's like halfway through. And then the next day, you're like, yeah, I'm done.
I played the crap out of that game.
Brandon can marathon games in a way that I don't understand.
He just spends time.
I don't know. It's either a superpower or a disease, or somewhere in between. But I loved Xenoblade 1. Like, there was just a point in that game where suddenly things are happening, and I'm like, oh my god, I have to know what happens next. I think it takes a while to get to that point, but once it hits, it's just, man, I couldn't put it down. I can't say the same about Xenoblade 2, but I might talk more about that later.
Sure.
But yeah, that's my history.
Cool.
No Xenoblade X, I haven't played that.
Maybe sometime soon. What about you, Daniel?
Yeah, I've been in the Xenoblade consciousness ever since Operation Rainfall. That was so interesting to find out how there was just this triad of games that we wanted to see come over to more territories, and Xenoblade was definitely the one I was interested in the most. I didn't get it immediately, but eventually, before they stopped appearing on store shelves, I did get it for the Wii, and I played it there. Loved it. Took my time with it. It was like unlike anything I'd played at the time, because they really take the whole like MMO experience and make it a single player one. And so when 2 came out, I don't know, like I was excited for it, but I didn't get it right away. But then I heard about how much fun people were having and how amazing it was after it was released. So just a month after, I ended up getting it myself, and yeah, I think I'm in the area where I enjoy Xenoblade 2 more than 1, which I know it's not always people. I mean, you can ask anybody and they'll tell you what their favorite Xenoblade game is, and you have no idea which one they'll answer. But yeah, I played 1 and 2. Didn't play Chronicles X, but I might get back into that at some point in time. I know it's not exactly the same as 1, 2, or 3, but yeah, that's pretty much my experience with it. And then yeah, I was saying with Brandon, I ended up beating Xenoblade Chronicles 3 around the same time. We had the similar experiences leading up to the end.
Cool. Before Xenoblade 1, we only had Xenosaga Episode 2 in Europe, so I didn't catch up. I didn't start with anything before Blade, but I started with Xenoblade on the Wii, played 3D, played X, played 2, played 3 of course, Torna. I went back though and also played Saga Episode 1 and 2, and imported Gears as well. Saga Episode 3 is my only gap. But, I like Xenoblade 2. I feel like it's a really good game, and it's getting a lot of hate these days. And I feel like there are definitely criticisms that it warrants, but I think it's still just a really damn good game. But I'd say my favourite is probably, out of those two, is probably still the first one though. The first one's story is just so strong, and there's no topping the contextual world of, two titans. It's just so cool, and nothing's really come close to that since. But we are not here to talk about the past. We're here to talk about the present, or 3 months ago of the present. So Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is such a special game, I feel. I don't want to get my thoughts out there immediately, though. So, I want to go with you, Brandon. Your initial impressions when you were like 5 hours into this game, were you thinking this is something special, or did it not quite click there yet?
I was feeling that in the first hour of the game. Just the way that game opens is so impressive. They really take the time to flesh out the world. And even though that opening tutorial literally has you playing with one character, because of how many characters you end up playing with in total at a given time, I think that was the right call. But just seeing this war take place in this dark, gloomy life that these people live, and then getting a glimpse into their history, with a really long cutscene of detailing how their training sessions went, getting an idea of their relationships early on. It sucked me in almost immediately, and I cannot say the same thing about the first two games. This game's opening is fantastic.
It's great. And, 2 takes a long time to start. Technically 3 does too. 3 has a lot of cutscenes, but it is immediately interesting though. That's the big difference. It's throwing you into these really high stakes moments. And also the production values are crazy good. If you go back to Xenoblade Chronicles 2, it doesn't have proper lip syncing. So a lot of the time, the English voice actors were they're doing their best to sort of mimic the Japanese flaps, but it rarely works. Whereas here they've actually gone through the effort to dub, to actually move the lips to the dub, which is really, really cool. But yeah, it's just that you get a full-on relationship from the get-go. You're not really going out to find your entire party. They're pretty much there from mostly the start. But yeah, it's a great opening though. Were you sort of feeling the same, Daniel?
Yeah, the scale of everything towards the beginning is really impressive, and just showing how high the stakes are at all times. Showing the war taking place as pretty close to the very, very first few minutes of the game, showing how the people will die.
Yeah.
And death is a very common theme across this entire game, and it kind of lingers over certain characters in the game, in your party as well. But I think the way it's introduced is very well done. You get, as was mentioned, you understand that your party, you've been friends this whole time, you've pretty much known each other all your lives, and it's just kind of dark already. It shows you how natural it is that they're training children for war, and it's it puts you in the perspective. There's a bad scene within the first hour, but it's in a perspective of where these people were just grown up differently. They don't really, the gender norms don't attach themselves quite as what we would expect. So there's a lot of facets of this story that kind of catches you off guard, but it pulls you in a certain way where it's I want to see where these characters go, and then you meet the other 3 in your party fairly early on, and it's not in a they don't just are buddy. They're all opposing each other because there's 2 different forces of Kevez and Agnes, and it's just a really interesting dynamic to see that your party meets and introduces each other by trying to kill each other.
Yeah. And it's cool that one side kind of has the Xenoblade 1 mechanics and the other side has the 2 mechanics. When you get full control over the other colony, their attacks, they charge by auto attacking, by actually hitting, whereas the other one's more timed. And that's just such a cool way of sort of linking the 2 games. Because I think it is important for the full context that you play Xenoblade 1 and 2. But it's not a necessity though. You can get through 3 without playing those games, but you'll have a sense of, reward if you have played the whole series though. It's not quite in the same way as 2 though. If you've played Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and you finished 2, the ending is so satisfying. But I guess it works in reverse. Yeah. I think you can play 2 first and then play 1 and have a complete satisfying ending. But 3, it just that the world comes together there. Like, I think you did that, yeah, Brandon. Yeah.
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 Works either way.
And, just like from the get-go, too, you can feel that the quality of life improvements are so good. One of my favorite ones was just switching in combat. I remember in Xenoblade 1, there's one moment where I think one of the bosses pretty much needed melee, and I was just hitting them with Shulk, and I basically had to die to change to melee, whereas now you can just hold down a shoulder button and switch to another character, which is so, like, you don't have to rely on the AI all the time, and that's awesome.
It's so nice, and I just appreciate how battles have been mindfully simplified in a way where it's not too complicated, and like that you don't have to fumble with characters that you want to play as to accomplish the thing that you want to have accomplished. That should be something you should just be able to do. And just the fact that, yeah, you don't have to deal with blades, and there's multiple characters with one character. You're just that one character with dealing with the class that you set them to in battle. And yeah, it's like people complain about Xenoblade Chronicles 2's the battle system is a bit complicated and cumbersome.
Blade combo.
They cleaned it up a fair amount in Torna, and I was hoping that with Torna they're going to carry that on to 3, and they mostly did for the most part, just kind of keeping it much more manageable than it was in previous titles.
Yeah, it definitely is streamlined. There's always going to be numbers flying around everywhere, and it's interesting how they can make something more intuitive while having this huge party. Like prior games like Parties of 4, where this is massive. There's so much going on, but at the same time, it's so much easier to follow, and it's such a interesting balance of how they achieved that.
It has a really simple design language in the battles, like having the blue circles around your defenders, your tanks. So like you know from the beginning that those are the two characters you want aggro to be attached to. And then you have that line system that shows who's being aggroed by what enemy. It makes everything really easy to follow, like you said.
Yeah.
It's super smart. Like I'm one of those people that really struggled to understand Xenoblade 2's battle system. Not to say that it's not understandable at all. I think the game is at fault for not doing it very well, or not explaining itself very well. But Xenoblade 3, you just kind of hop in, and everything just makes sense. They introduce each role to you, tell you what they're for, and then at that point, like, you know how you should handle a battle. You want enemies to aggro your tanks, your DPS to deal damage, and your healers to heal your defenders. Like, it's a very simple formula. And, if people who've played, like, Final Fantasy XIV, they're very used to that. So they've gone even farther to make that MMO experience a single-player experience, and I think that's really cool.
That hero system, it really is an evolution of what Blades were. Like, Blades were meant to sort of, like, it allows you to sort of change up your moveset on the fly, and get, like, a constant rotation of different moves and characters. But this, for one, it doesn't have gacha, but secondly, it's just so much more intuitive, and the experimentation's awesome too. Like, when I first started, like, moving my classes around, I guess my first impression was I didn't quite see the point of why I had to keep sort of changing everyone's role when I can just stick with one. But when you start getting more heroes, it becomes very obvious why you should. And it just that sort of selection pool is constantly engaging. I always wanted to see like what other setups I could find, or I wanted to like constantly get everyone's level up. And it's like you have the like traditional level up system. You've got the classes leveling up. It just feels like everything is achieving something at all times. And by the end, you never really just stick with one lineup for the entire game. Like, you're constantly shifting what you have. It just felt really, really clever.
Yeah, there's so many different combinations you can do. As you said, I was kind of like, I'm just switching the same roles with the same characters at first, and I'm just like, well, I could just keep them the same.
Yeah.
But as you get more heroes, there's more healer classes, there's more defender classes. They can do different and achieve different things, and just having them as a guest partner in your party changes everything up quite a bit, because then you can assign different roles to your main party as well to kind of like balance out to make sure you have like at least two of each role. And I thought it was just really smartly done, and just how the heroes are implemented too. Like, they each introduce themselves to your party through a quest that you don't. A lot of them you don't need to do. Some of them are story focused, and you have to do them. But some of them you don't have to interact with at all. But they feel so integral to the story. Like, you feel like you should, and you really don't need to, but you should be able to enjoy their story, and it's just very organically implemented into the world itself. And yeah, I think they're just done really well in this game. I wanted to go and find out every single one, even though it added several hours to my total gameplay time.
It kind of reminds me of Majora's Mask in that way, where the real meat of those stories are in the world building, and the world building comes from the side quests. Like, those, I won't say all of them are, but like most of the hero quests are so like character driven and detailed that it feels like you're actually missing out if you're not doing them. Like, you're missing an integral part to the world that would improve your experience. There's only a few cases where I didn't find that to be true, and that was usually in the Ascension hero quests.
Sure, yeah.
Specifically for Xeon, I think? Or Zion?
Yeah, Xeon Grassel, my favorite.
Xeon.
Sorry, Xeon.
Favorite hero.
His Ascension quest is obnoxious, and whoever designed it needs to really think about that.
Oh no, I didn't do that one, so now I'm afraid.
It's the actual concept of the quest I really like. After you liberate the colony, they have to figure out how to sustain themselves with food. So Xeon's like, well, let's start gardening.
Yeah.
So you go to another colony and they teach you how to garden. You bring some potatoes back, and then you start gardening. And you fail the gardening process like 3 times.
No.
He makes you plant them, and then you have to wait for it to rain in order to continue the quest. Or you go talk to a Napon, pay 10,000 gold, and hope it rains, because it's not guaranteed. I think I burned like 40,000 gold the second time trying to get it to rain, because it just didn't work. And then eventually everything works out and the quest finally ends. But it's just obnoxious in a way that wastes your time, which is something this game is very good at not doing.
Now you know what farmers struggle with. It taught you something about the real world, Brandon.
They just
I didn't want to know that.
Please rain. Yeah. It is interesting, the divide between main quest, side quest, and hero quest, because sometimes there's just a blur. Like, sometimes some side quests feel like they are main quests. A lot of the side stories for the main cast, a lot of them feel integral to the story. Like, if you miss out on them, you're not really getting the full story. But then sometimes main quests are like, oh no, this animal's stolen our food, we've got to go get him. Like, that feels like a side quest at times. But what I guess gloves off a bit for spoilers. We'll get fully gloves off. But there's this one moment with Uni where she finds out a big moment about her. We'll talk about it more in the spoiler section. But basically, the result of that doesn't actually appear until her side story. And it feels like this was a big story moment, because the story brings a lot of attention to it. And there's multiple times where she reflects on that moment, but you never get the payoff until you play her side story. Is that good or bad? Because I honestly don't know.
It's hard to say. You don't get the payoff unless you do the side story, but the implications of that moment are still very important to the overall plot. And even without having the payoff, they still manage to drive the story forward in a meaningful way, I think. So for me, it's almost like, hey, if you want to feel more satisfied about this moment, there's this thing here that you can do. You don't know outside going in that that's what's going to happen, but it is there. And I don't think you lose anything by not having that, per se. I don't know. It's a hard balance to strike, but I do think they were close.
Yeah. And, talking of Uni, I'm going to ask you a very big question here. Who was your favorite character? We've got Noah, we've got Mio, we've got Uni, we've got Lanz. Tyon, yes. And then Senna. Yeah. Who was your favorite of the entire cast?
Favorite character, it's Uni for me.
Yeah.
She's
a bus.
She's the bus. she's so funny. It's just funny because if you play Xenoblade Chronicles 1, you know her race of people and what kind of people they are. Very elegant, very serene. You get Melia in the first game, and you kind of see how that kind of is flipped on its head because of her personality, but Uni takes it further
Yeah.
because she just says exactly what's on her mind. She's the most brash character in the party, and just most of her lines are just hilarious. I really enjoy her character and just seeing her growth. As you mentioned, she has a very like existential moment that happens to her, and you see how that keeps coming up over and over. Like after that moment happens, like immediately the night after, you see her character you kind of see behind her character a bit more, and you see her shaking while she's trying to hold a teacup, and then Taion is there trying to comfort her, and there's a nice little interaction between the two. But I just like the layers that Uni has to her. It's just really fun to see, and the interaction with everybody.
There were definitely a few characters that, in the early hours, I thought they seemed a bit plain. Like Noah, I thought he felt very vanilla to begin with, but he earned his moments though. Like Noah has some extremely good moments.
They hold that in their back pocket. Yeah,
they do. Yeah, Taion too. Like to start with, I thought, oh, this guy's a jerk, but you start to love him. But you know,
yeah, like my second favorite character is probably Taion.
Yeah,
honestly.
But I've got to agree with Daniel. It's Uni. She's a bus.
My favorite characters are. It's close. Overall, I think my favorite character is Mio. Because I really resonate with her personal struggle. I don't know if we want to delve into that yet or wait until later.
You know, we're talking about characters and story. Let's take the gloves off. Come on, everyone, remove your gloves.
Gloves coming off.
They're coming off.
It's hard not to. Yeah, it's hard not to get into the real meat of the characters.
When we kept saying, that moment with Uni, we're talking about the dog tag moment. There you go.
Yeah, they know.
They know.
That's what they're here for.
Mio's struggle, knowing that her 10 years of life is coming to a close very, very soon, while she's on this quest that could potentially liberate all the people of the world. That's something I really struggled with. Not struggled with, resonate with. I resonate with that struggle because I know what it's like to think that there's an expiration date on you, I guess, in a way. And it's not a good feeling. But seeing her kind of struggle to accept that and then, like, find comfort in her friends, like, especially with Noah. There's even a couple scenes where they don't quite see eye to eye on everything, and there's some lashing out. And those scenes really hit home for me. So yeah, Mio is definitely at the top. But right behind Mio is a character trope that I've always loved, and that is the bulky, badass, slightly dumb, slightly angry man in Lands. Lands is so funny. He reminds me of a lot of my favorite characters, like I said, which are the brutes that are really soft on the inside, but they're just so powerful and big. He also has a struggle that I really resonate with. There's a moment where a character loses their life and he feels responsible for that, and for his entire life he feels that grief and that weight on his shoulders, and I think it's just really powerful stuff. And yeah, character details in this game are next level.
Kind of resonate with the whole thing with Mio as well. In chapter 4, you see especially that she begins to get very anxious because she has the least amount of time left out of anybody in the crew, and that's when she starts to lash out at some people. I thought it was a kind of a powerful moment that she and Noah traded their flutes with each other, because her flute as an officer came from Miyabi, who, as we learn later, she also had given her life to save both Mio and Senna because of an incident that happened in their colony a long time ago. And so just the act of trading those flutes so that it can continue to play music for longer, that was that hit pretty strong, actually, just because I think we've all had someone at some point that may be important to us pass on in our lives, and just wanting to have that part of them live on longer. It's that's just where the theme of death just keeps coming up again, and that's just it's a constant worry for many of the characters in the story because they do believe that their life ends at just 10 years, which is super short. And but anyways, what were you gonna say, John?
Well, kind of going off what you said, it's interesting how the approach to death changes as the game goes on. Because at the start, it's almost like a beautiful thing. Like if you've lasted your 10 years, everyone just sends you off. It's like
a celebration.
It's a celebration, right? But then as it becomes clear that that is not the natural flow, it's like fighting back against that. But I will say that is one of my criticisms of the story too. Is I think it goes over that idea a lot. Like, the first few times, I think it works really well. But it pulls that idea along a lot. There's a general repetition of, oh, these people don't quite believe us yet. Let's free them from the flame clock. Oh, they believe us now. And that happens again and again and again. And you sort of go over this trend of, oh, we need to fight to survive, but we need to survive to live. And it's just constant repeat of that sort of theme. And I didn't feel like this game always had the twists of 1 and 2. There's definitely still some big moments in there, but it sticks to its themes of moving on a lot, and I don't always feel like it evolved from that. Am I alone in that feeling, or is that something you guys kind of felt too?
I think that's a kind of a side effect of having the story begin so hard the way it does. Just it starts off with the whole life and death thing. They don't ease you into it. It's just a theme that lingers on for so long that by the time they reach that point, as you mentioned, it kind of tapers off into other things. But yeah, that's more or less how I feel about that thematic. Like, I love the approach, but at the end, it kind of just drags on a bit long, as you mentioned. And
which is funny because I think this is probably the shortest of the trilogy. But it does kind of feel like it drags its toes a little bit towards the end.
I don't know if I ever experienced that feeling playing through the game. Like, especially when you're going through the colonies, because as you build up the amount of colonies you've saved, the colonies that you encounter start to know who you are ahead of time.
Sure, yeah.
And some of them even want you to do what you've been doing by the time you get there. So I think it does evolve in that sense that these people are now aware of what life is really like, and they are very quick to say, yeah, let's make that happen. Who cares about all this other stuff that's going on? There's especially a character like Captain Triton, who's been around for so long and has experienced so many people going away after their lives have ended, and he's like, nah, forget that. I don't care about this anymore. I just want to get on a boat with my friends and sail the 7 seas.
Yeah.
So yeah, it doesn't really taper off for me particularly, but I can definitely see why you would say that.
Yeah. I want to praise one thing before I have another criticism. I want to say the voice acting across the board is great. I think this series always has brilliant casts. One mostly focused on like London and Yorkshire for their sort of voice reach. And then 2 just went everywhere around the sort of UK. You had like Wales, you had Scotland, you had North and South. And 3, it's a bit less of an array than 2's, but you've got like the Welsh voice actress back with Mio and Nia, and you've also got this just a brilliant central cast. And Noah, as we were sort of saying earlier, like, he starts off very plain, quite soft-spoken, but that man, he can... I never thought Adam Howden would have a competition for screaming, but Noah's voice actor, that man can scream. That man can scream.
Range.
He has range.
Yeah, he does.
And a lot of that comes with the villains. And this is also part of my criticism, but also a praise. I think N and M are fantastic. Like when I first saw them, I thought, oh, this is a bit tropey. That's clearly just the evil Noah. But no, there's some really deep moments in there. But my criticism, though, in general, is I don't feel like a lot of the villains were that memorable, and many of them were very cartoonish. I think like in the previous game, like Malos and Jin, I think they are pretty deep villains. But a lot of this cast, they're just kind of like, oh, I'm going to cause evil. Oh, you can't stop me. Oh no, you've stopped me. That's generally all they do.
There was like major villain of the day vibes from a lot of these consoles for each colony. That's just what it felt like for most of it, because they would be there for their episode, you defeat them, free the colony, destroy the flame clock, move onward to the next one. I mean, there were the major ones that you see appearing throughout the story, but for the most part, you kind of just like, oh, they're just evil to be evil sort of vibe I get from them.
I kind of teeter-totter on this a little bit, because, like, I think you probably could have shrunken the amount of consoles and focused on the ones that really were, like, integral to the story, because there are some in there who are just, like, vehemently bad people, or maybe not bad people, and, you know, you feel a strong way about them because of that. But then there are a lot of faceless ones, such as, I think the very first console you defeat is just a nobody, right?
I think so, yeah.
Like, the mask comes off and they're like, he's wrinkly. And I'm like, that's an important moment, but he's just a dude.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So I think you could have shrunken them, but at the same time, I feel like if we had had less consoles who took over, like, multiple colonies, that may have made the story feel like it drags a bit. Because you're constantly facing the same force. But to me, like, having all these consoles and taking them down, that felt like progress to me. Like, oh, I defeated one of their generals, I've liberated the colony, now it's time to take down the next one. So while I agree to an extent, I think part of that services the gameplay.
You're right. There's definitely a gameplay purpose to it as well, as in, like, if something were to happen to one of these consoles in the story, that means they couldn't appear in a side quest, right? So you've got to have ones that don't have as much importance, otherwise the story's going to feel weird. So that makes sense. I just feel like very few of them really had much of a presence, and I just kind of wanted to get through their moments, because I was like, let's just keep rolling, you know? But there definitely were some
are
good
there
villains.
to die.
Yeah.
That is their whole thing.
Yeah.
There are certain characters that are there to not serve as much of a significance. But do you know what some characters do serve a greater significance that we haven't even talked about yet? And very early on, the whole reason that our characters become the Ouroboros is by a certain man who we're very familiar with in other Xenoblade games. And that name comes up further on later in the game, but that's Vandam.
Yeah.
Guernica Vandam.
Same voice actor as Twos as well.
Yeah, he's that's the first time that the characters realize, hey man, you're all wrinkly, and he describes how he's older than them. He's 60 years old, and they blows their minds because they can't fathom that. The concept of how the party understands life and aging and all that other stuff later on in the city as well is just so fascinating to me. But I was kind of shocked and sad that Vandam, poor man, didn't even survive one chapter this time.
Yeah. That man's just built to die.
His death, I think, hits in a very different way, because his death doesn't come from, oh, I've lived 10 years, or I've lived less than 10 years, and now I'm going to die. This man lived a full life, and now he's going, and there's a unique sadness that comes from that, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've sort of talked about humans, like as in actual ones that can live a full lifespan. That moment when you get to the city and you just see all these people, but the real moment I'm talking about is the baby moment, when everyone just sort of gathers around, holds the baby, lets them grab their hand. A lot in Xenoblade, I think there's a lot of moments that feel like they're animated robotically, like the conversations we just kind of go like, ugh. But this is one of the moments where I thought, like, this is great. It felt really real. Like it's probably not motion captured, I guess, but it's really high quality. And 3's full of those moments that couldn't have happened in previous games. But just emotionally speaking, it was just a really brilliant moment.
Yeah, the city was especially fascinating because the characters witness a whole different lifestyle where there's people who are couples, there's children, as you mentioned, and the baby scene was so wholesome because it was done very slowly but in a very meaningful way, because like you have Mio hold her finger out and the baby grabs on and they're all excited, and then Tyon has my absolute best reaction because when it happens to Tyon, he gets so excited, and you don't ever see him that excited
so
before.
off character, yeah.
And he's just genuinely like thrilled and fascinated, and then they all learn about how that happens. There's that scene where they're about to explain shall we explain how babies are made, and they're all like, yeah, and then I was waiting for like this big gag moment, like they come out of the office and they're like, "Wow, so that's a thing," but they didn't really follow up on that. It's just kind of passed, but still a lot of amazing moments in the city, and we see a female Vandom in Monica. That was awesome.
Yeah,
she was a really great character, honestly.
Brilliant character. The city's interesting too because like this game doesn't like traditionally have towns. Like Xenoblade 2 has a lot of towns. 1 has a few colonies and towns too. But I guess the towns are more camps in 3. Like you'll go around and you'll find colonies, which they work as towns, but they're not quite the same like robust ones. But the city is kind of like your big traditional town, and it's such a different vibe from going from this sort of desolate, not wasteland, but like very everything's at war. There aren't robust civilizations, and it's such a different vibe. Even though it is like enclosed and hidden, it feels different getting to that sort of big open area. Kind of more like what you'd expect from previous games. But like 2 was very segmented. Like you've got titans, which are all these different regions, but you can't like walk from one titan to the other. And I think that's one of the big reasons I love 1 so much, is you scale up these bodies, you go across the sword. It's like you're always contextually somewhere in the world. And 3 is like a middle ground between the two. It's not quite as cool as the world of 1, but it definitely is tied together more than any other of the trilogy. And I guess X wins out, right? Because X has no loading screens, you can just go anywhere. But 3 is still a really, really good world.
Yeah, with 3, like in any point in 3, you can kind of look around the map and you can like see where Sword March is. Like you can see the blade, you can see the Titan of Uriah or somewhere. And then obviously with Xenoblade 1 does it so well because you can look off over any cliff and you can contextualize and find out like where you are. You see the arm, the sword, the face, and it'd be like, it's just such a fascinating spectacle whenever you look out in that world. One of my favorite worlds in any game. But yeah, I think it really hit me when, you know how whenever you go to a new area, it shows like all in text, like what it is, what colony and all that. But then when you go to the city, it's all this and then it's just city.
Yeah.
And you're like, but that kind of hits me in a way like, oh, this is just a city. We haven't been to an actual like living civilization until now, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. You never really think about it.
The characters didn't know what a city was.
Right.
They just thought that was its name, and I think that's another like interesting facet of this story. But I want to also commend, kind of like what Daniel was saying about being able to see these landmarks from basically anywhere. The game and the developers know what the returning players are here for. Why is the Bionic sword there? Why is Uriah here? And you experience that first thing that happens in chapter 1, and then you're immediately said, go to the sword. And you're like, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to go to the sword.
Why is Sword Valley sticking up? What is happening here?
So I want to commend them for just immediately setting you on your path to the thing that they know you want to, the thing they know that you want to figure out.
Right. And they also tease you with like showing you Melia like pretty early on. Like she's masked, but it's Melia. We've known since the first trailer that it's Melia. But I kind of want to talk about the city again, because when you get there, there's a central point with a bunch of statues. And I like that they don't force feed it. They don't go, oh yes, this is Shulk. I like that you've got to read. You've actually got to figure out. Like you've got to go up to them and interact yourself to really figure out who they all are. And some of the characters put other characters in their place to sort of represent them, which is kind of cool too. But I think my initial thought seeing those statues was, oh, this is going to be the DLC. Because like we've seen the icon where it's all of their swords coming together, like the Aegis Blade, the Monado. And then you see like they are the founding members of this society. So I'm pretty certain that's gonna be like our Torna style DLC for this, right?
I guess I haven't considered that, but that's definitely a possibility of what we could see in the future. That was the point when I saw this statue. I was like, okay, where's all the connection points for the other Xenoblade games gonna come? Is it gonna happen here in the city? Are we gonna get like name drops? But they really just kind of leave it open-ended, and that's definitely something that they can just throw into a DLC episode and have you explore yourself and find out like how exactly did this all tie together in a common thread.
I'm expecting a prequel just like Torna, where we play as like a grab bag of 1 and 2 protagonists, because we know we've seen a bunch of them already in the statues. We know they've met each other. It feels like there's a story there.
I'm also personally interested in what happens after the credits roll, because I think there's also a story you could tell there. Maybe that's the future of the series. I don't know.
I thought about that, Brandon. I don't know if that is symbolism or something, because like it feels like the theme of this game is moving on. It's about how it's about not being in the moment. It's about not being in a frozen point in time. It's about just sort of moving on. And I wonder if this is jumping way ahead, but like we hear like the flute at the end. We know Mio is kind of, I guess, like hinted to be in the world with Noah. But I wonder if that's just their way of saying like, move on. I don't know.
I didn't read that as her maybe being in the world. I agree with you. I felt it was just a note about moving on. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that the first two games do at the end of their stories is, it shows what happened in the real world that made everything take place.
Yeah.
And in 3, we see all of that from the perspective of the inside. We never get that outside perspective from, Klaus or whatever, from the real world.
Right.
And a friend of mine told me that they were disappointed that they never delved into any of that stuff, because the lore of the world of Xenoblade is very interesting, especially if you go back and look at Xenogears and Xenosaga and see how it all fits together, because it does. There's more there that they can delve into, and they didn't this time.
No.
And while I think that the character-driven story of 3 is fantastic and my favorite amongst, the 3 Xenoblade games, I feel like they intentionally just kind of let that go and didn't talk about it at all.
Right. Like before this game came out, like the week before, the director sent a message saying that this was the end of the trilogy. This is the end of the story that started with Klaus. And I was like, oh man, how are they going to wrap this up? How are they going to bring in all the lore? But they don't really. Which I think it's satisfying in its own right, though. Like 3 does a lot on its own. It leans on elements from 1 and 2, being some characters and part of the world. But it tells its own story, and I think it has its own legacy, which I think I respect more than trying to borrow from a decade. I guess like 3 decade, 2.5 decade maybe long legacy that started with Gears. But yeah, I think I kind of like that they didn't necessarily lean on Klaus again.
Yeah. I mean, I agree to an extent. It's when I start thinking about the main antagonist of the game that things start to fall apart for me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because I guess we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
But Z, or Zed, he is not an individual. He is an idea.
Right.
And, obviously his name starts with Z, and there's implications behind that from, a full Xenoblade lore perspective. But like you said, they never delve into that.
No.
So on some level, like the major antagonist, I feel, doesn't... I don't know. I have a hard time with that. Like, I think the antagonist being a concept of not wanting to move on is cool, but the way it's represented in its finale is a little weak, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if the themes of not wanting to move on also apply to the franchise? I think Xenoblade as a franchise has achieved godly things. 1 is one of the best RPGs ever. 2, not far behind. 3 is doing... I think 3 is the most fun RPG I've ever played. I have issues with the story sometimes, but in terms of raw gameplay, I think it's incredible. But I wonder where you move... Like, where do you go from here, though? Can we go to another big grassy plain? Can we just keep doing these sort of philosophical stories, or do we just wrap things up and go to an entirely different direction? Because this is the end of the trilogy. What's next for Xenoblade? Was the theme of moving on also relevant to the franchise itself?
Yeah,
we might be so meta in that way.
We might be going from Xenoblade to Xeno something else, or there very well could not be a Xeno something else. I have a hard time thinking that, knowing how well these games have performed.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting question. I do think that they have to leave the trilogy behind. There is a part of me that's always going to wonder what happened to these worlds. And I might not ever get an answer. And I guess I'll just have to be okay with that.
Yeah. We've got to move on. It's the theme of the game.
Yeah.
We have jumped round and round and round with the story, but I want to focus on a very specific point, because whenever someone says, "Bro, Chapter 5," you know what they mean. You know what they mean when you say Chapter 5.
Oh yeah.
Daniel, talk us through it.
Oh my goodness, me. Yeah, Chapter 5 is the one where even Ash, who we're in a chat with him right now, Brandon, and he reached Chapter 5 and he's like, "Oh my god, can you believe what just happened in Chapter 5?" They're trying to find Monica's daughter, Gondor, because she knows where the true queen is, or at least where the Queen of Agnes. And so they essentially get themselves locked up. They find her, they work out a prison escape, and essentially when they try to escape, consoles M and N find them. At this point, we discover that for sure they look exactly like Noah and Mio. So you're like, what's going on here? And so they essentially get captured. M. It's important to note that M specifically wants to fight the crew by herself, and that's important to what's about to happen, because even N is surprised that she wants to do that as well. I remember noting that he was like, why? But her specific ability is to copy the appearance of others, and so you have to work with Tyon and his cool little. You didn't talk about his cool little Mondo that he fights with, to win that battle. But you still eventually lose, and your party gets locked up, and Mio is separated in her own locked up area. And N, being as cocky as he is, he wants to celebrate Mio's homecoming, and that's going to be the end of her life. And so the big moment, you see the whole month pass by. Mio's kind of accepted that this is going to happen, while Noah is constantly trying to escape from here. Yeah, it's hopeless. They've kind of all given up except Noah. But the day comes, and it hits hard because she's starting to disappear. But then N gives Noah the flute to send her off himself, and he refuses. But then you see Mio disappear, and then you get the idea that Noah is killed at the same time. And then things start to get a little crazy. Does anyone want to continue that off from there? Because I'm talking about this a lot now.
We start experiencing Noah's past lives from here on out. Which is a lot of information to take in, because they take you through various instances of Noah's life. It's not even until after all of that has taken place and you see this scene afterwards that it really all kind of fits together and you understand what happened. But we have found out that in a past life, Noah and Mio were members of the city. At one point, they had a baby. Mio dies.
This is the perspective of several past lives. And one of them is they have the child, but then in all of these, essentially, as you were saying, you're about to say, they in some way or form they die mostly to the consoles. Or Mobius, essentially.
Did we find out what happened to that baby?
We never find out.
I guess that could also be a DLC, perhaps, but I'm still betting on the statue stuff.
We also weirdly never learn its name, the same way we never learned what Noah actually calls Lucky 7.
That was weird.
Yeah. What the heck?
I feel like they're going to touch on that at some point, because that's a weird thing to just never answer. But regardless, the reason we go through all these scenes is because we are watching the progression of N losing his sanity as he has to re-experience losing Mio over and over and over again. And this is all being shown to him by Zed, who I guess is trying to recruit him into Mobius. And really start this. I guess he's not starting it, but continue the tragedy of the whole game. And after that, and there's a lot of this, by the way. We find out that I guess Mio has kind of been guiding Noah through all of this memory stuff that he's experiencing, and then we cut back to Agnes Castle right when Noah is about to strike. And I guess, John, I will flip this back over to you to finish us off.
So I guess the general gist is what happened during the fight earlier is Mio and M switch bodies. So what's actually happening is M is being sent off, and N just loses it. And I felt until this point, M was one of the better villains, but he snaps and he becomes something way better than that. He's not just the best villain in the game; he is outstanding. And both Noah and N shine in this moment. In my opinion, flips on the both of them. They are incredible. And you really start to see their weaknesses and strengths. But you just sort of feel like a shudder moment, seeing like not only N's heartbreaking, but also that M would just, that she's dead. They're not responsible for it, but you sort of feel like, oh god, this hits hard. I was wondering, like, during that, when we initially saw that Mia was captured and that she was being sent off, I was thinking, like, is this an Aerith moment? Are we just going to lose one of our party members? But no, we even get to choose her hair length. Do you want to be like long or short? What did you guys choose, by the way? Just curious.
I can't believe they did the whole "do you want to name her Pyra or Mithra?" here, but with hair or long hair. The correct answer is ponytail. That's not on the option, so neither are. I chose long hair for a while, but then I chose short hair afterward because I was like, I'm kind of used to her with short hair. At this point.
I went short hair too.
I went short hair because I like Mia with short hair more personally. Yeah, because it's my Mio.
That moment where N realizes that it's M that's disappearing and his whole world just falls apart, and you realize the implication of that, like, oh, thank goodness now our Mio can stay alive because her time was up. But then you still hear N shouting and being like, that was my M, like as if she's property or something, and he's just lost it. He's gone off the deep end, and M's just been tired of harvesting souls and staying alive. So her death is kind of like understandable. She just wants to escape all this pain.
Right. And
there's just a lot of feelings during this moment. It's crazy.
It's a great chapter. Like I have my issues with the story every now and then, but this entire chapter is just brilliant from beginning to end. It's just constant hits.
If you go back and rewatch the what is effectively a 2-hour movie at the end of chapter 5, I did it late at night, and I was like, okay, I'll just get through the end of this, and then I'll go to sleep. And then 2 hours passed by of me watching the screen, not pressing buttons. It goes on for a long time. If you go back and watch those scenes, especially of Mio in the cell and her passing, they hit very differently when you have the context ahead of time. Because this game is really great at expressing facial emotion. Like they've done a lot of great things in their technology to make that to sell that really well. And just when she turns back and smiles right before she disappears, it just means something completely different than it does when you see it the first time.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredible. I also want to ask, I was a flippin' wreck during this whole period of time. I actually cried. The game got me to cry tears. It was very emotional for me. And I don't know if it was all of that emotion that was forcing me to not think through the whole thing, but did any of you expect that to happen?
No, I teared
them
up.
To have switched bodies?
I think this entire cast is brilliant. They feel like family and friends by the end. And the thought of losing Mio was like dreadful. She was one of my favorite characters. It definitely got me. 2 got me at one point in Xenoblade 2, near the end with Poppy. She got me a little bit. But
it's very sad to see her that upset. I felt bad.
But by the way, Poppy, that we'll come to Poppy. But
that's
we'll get
soon.
to Poppy. But yeah, this scene really did get me for sure.
I think it's interesting to look back at the actual battle with M, where she can switch her body into any of the cast members during the fight. I had this experience. I don't know if anyone else did or if it's programmed this way. She only ever does it once during the fight.
Yeah, I think that's all I had. Yeah.
And
maybe. I think so.
I think that services the narrative, because like she's not there to defeat you. She has already concocted this plan. So she doesn't really try to fight you that hard. It's all a show for N specifically. So she does it once, you kind of coast through the fight, and then looking back on that, it's just like, wow, she deliberately made it easier.
Yeah.
Because they build up this whole mechanic, and then they don't really use it at all.
That is interesting, yeah. While we're talking about
yeah.
characters, let's talk about the queens a little bit, because they are one of the big driving forces for like just seeing the story forward. So we've got Melia and Nia from 1 and 2 are back. How did you feel about their inclusion here in 3?
It was definitely something to hook in fans of the series immediately, because they never lived in the same world together, and now you're in this world where they both are commanding 2 different armies that are at war, and you're thinking to yourself, these 2 characters, they wouldn't propagate war amongst anybody.
Something felt wrong from the start. Yeah.
Yeah, something was the fact that their faces were hidden, partially because they don't want to show their cards right away, but also later on you find out that they're not exactly the queens that you think that they are. And so I think their inclusion was really cool. Later on, like, I don't know how far we're talking about this right now, but you do eventually fight at the queens, and it gives you some perspective of the world as far as like, okay, this world isn't really what you think it is, because I think you fight Queen Melia in the throne room the same time that they discover how all the pods are there and they're making people, and then you even see Ethel, who had just passed away, fighting Amravi, which was also another high moment. There's so many high moments in this game. You see Ethel there, and then there's a lot of the story just kind of they feed you enough of the story with every chapter that gets you interested to keep going, and that was another major moment. And just to find out that the queen was like basically a robot. I'm just like, what is happening in this game?
When that happened, I thought that was a bait and switch. I was like, is Melia actually just not in this game?
Yeah.
To lie to us?
I mean, the thing with Melia is she's voiced by Jenna Coleman, who's a pretty big actress in general now. Like, she was Clara in Doctor Who, but she's been like Queen Victoria. She's been a bunch of big roles. And I was like, when she came out for Future Connected, I was like, how did they manage this? And now they've got her back for like a pretty huge role in this game. And it was cool fighting Melia in that throne room, even if it wasn't really her. Like, just sort of seeing all of her elemental skills being used, because we used that for an entire game, and now we're fighting against that. Now that was a pretty cool moment. But interestingly for the story, they rely a bit more on Nia for a lot of it. And Nia has a very different mannerism to 2. Like, she's much less vicious, a lot more like well spoken. And I love that there's a scene in the final battle where they draw attention to that. Like, oh, come on, unleash, like, be your true self, and then you get like a proper Welsh. It's good. It's a good moment.
I love it. It's so good.
Yeah.
It's such a big payoff.
Yeah.
God. Yeah, especially when you first actually finally see Nia. That was another bait and switch, that moment when you finally discover Nia, because you're at the Cloud Keep. You finally discover, because you have the key from Gondor, and Mio leads you to that place because M kind of had knowledge about it. And then you find her pretty easily. She's just kind of sleeping on in a little pod, and then she starts to wake up, and then immediately she's shot.
Yeah.
Before she even opens her eyes, and Monolith Soft wants you to be like, no.
Yeah.
Like, why?
She's fine.
So a whole sequence happens. A battle ensues. There's some important plot stuff that happens, but as far as we're talking about the queens, she's fine.
Yeah,
she's fine.
I also love when we see Melia. It starts playing like a choir version of 2's main like lyrical theme. It's really cool. She's like a really good mix. Yeah.
Yeah, I love how she was done, because there's so many moments where she's being all soft-spoken and proper, and then she'll dive out of character. Well, more so in character to what she actually is like, and it's just so funny to see that interaction happening.
It's cool. It's cool seeing her and Mio interacting too, because obviously they're the same sort of species, but also it's very similar voices. But there's definitely like a different kind of history between the 2, and it's just kind of cool seeing them. There's a connection. You can tell they sort of put those 2 together a lot.
I mean, if you do quests in the post game, they flat out tell you.
Yeah. Right.
Are we lifting the lid on that as well? Or?
We can lift the lid. Lift the lid.
So, Mio's Nia's daughter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they tell you in her hero quest after the game. They don't flat out say it, but they heavily, heavily imply it. And this leads into something that I think has been a big point of conversation for a lot of people.
Okay.
That is Rex being an absolute giga chat.
Nintendo's first poly family, yeah.
Yeah.
That picture.
Yeah, that I remember.
That
was so funny because
Nintendo heard everyone saying who Rex should ship with, and they said yes, all of them.
Rex said like, "Oh, I love
good.
you guys. I love all of you." And there you go. You meant it.
He meant it.
He meant it. But it was such a funny
Good for
moment
you,
because
Mia.
it's the closing of the game. We've got this brilliant lyrical piece playing. Everyone's sort of saying their farewells, and you just get this. You know, you're not ready for it. Like you're ready for the goodbyes. You're ready for the feels. Then you just see like, oh. What's this? That's just that picture with all of them and 3 babies. Like, did this happen simultaneously? I have many questions.
Like before that you see. It was like before that you see they give you the little nods to the other games. You see Melia with the Monado EX, or the replica EX from the Future Connected, and it's like, oh, that's really sweet. She like kept it as a keepsake. And then you get to Nia, and the photo, I looked at it and I was like, oh, that's cute. Like you get to see everybody a bit older and they're all
like, oh wait,
and then with children. And so I took a screenshot right away because I'm just like, I need to look at this later.
Yeah.
And then when I look back at it again, I'm just like, hold on, what is happening here?
Yeah.
I had a similar experience. Like I didn't take a screenshot, but I looked at it for a second, and like right before it disappeared, I said, wait a minute. And then I had to pause the game and I looked it up on the internet to look at it again. And I was like, are you serious? That's crazy.
Oh my gosh.
That should be the DLC, just diving into how that all happened. I mean, I think
so good.
Did they want us to think this was the direction? Because like when you finish 2, the title screens, you know, Nia, Pyra, Mithra, and Rex holding hands. Were we meant to be thinking that they would become one happy family?
It was a sign
I never
all
thought
along.
that personally. Like I thought that with Pyra and Mithra.
Yeah.
But I thought from previous moments in the game that Rex had effectively rejected Nia.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
I thought that happened. I was pretty sure it did, but apparently not.
No. You just said when we're a bit older, you'll see, Nia.
He wasn't a man yet. Then when he became a man, he had different thoughts and said yes.
Oh, but while we're talking about this scene, Poppy, when she jumped out of that
Poppy,
capsule, I was so happy.
My heart skipped a beat.
It's like, oh, of course Poppy's here.
I have my issues with Poppy's creator, but Poppy is a pure soul, and we can't blame her for Tora.
Yeah.
Tora is in the game. He's mentioned at the very least. And I was like, we don't need that.
When was Tora mentioned?
He built...
Yeah.
Right? He built the machine to... I forgot the exact machine, what it was exactly, but essentially he helped to build Origin, didn't he?
Oh.
He did build Origin, yeah.
Oh,
built Origin,
that's
yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, Nia says, oh, it was a certain Napon that built it, and then obviously that's a wink at the camera that it was Tora.
Yeah. Huh. I didn't make that connection. That's cool.
Speaking of a winks to the camera, exactly that. I know we unfortunately haven't talked about Riku, the most Chad Napon of all, but
He's the
there's
best.
I
love him.
Riku's so good.
There's a moment when during that time when they're talking with Nia that Riku and Nia, they look at each other in the camera like a little like smirk nod kind of thing, like they know something. We don't know what that is.
He does that with Melia too.
Huh.
Both of them.
Okay, yeah, like who is this Napon? Because he's the one that gave Noah the Lucky 7 in the first place, which is a very integral part of the story.
We do know one thing about Riku, and that he's one of the 7 sword creator people.
Yeah.
Like, you do learn that in a side quest, but it seems to me like there's more going on there than meets the eye.
It's gonna turn out he's God or something, isn't it?
I've seen theories that he is what's his face from the first game? I can't think of it right now.
We'll just keep naming characters. The Colonel from Colony 9.
The blue-haired guy who knows how to use the Monado because he is the Monado.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Alvis.
Alvis, thank you. I have seen a lot of speculation that Riku is Alvis.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
It's interesting because they added the I forgot what the core was called, but the third one that wasn't in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, they added that to his actual model
Right,
like more prominently
right, yeah.
in Xenoblade 1.
Was that not there in 1?
Not in the Wii game, it wasn't, but they added it to Definitive Edition.
Oh.
Yeah, they added it after the fact so that people can make that connection more. They never really make any point of mentioning it, but it's there, and so that might help to tie some of these threads together, but I never thought about that.
Yeah, man.
We also don't see Riku in the post-credits when Noah and everyone is back in their original homeworld. But he's supposed to be from there. So
You're
where
right.
is he?
Yeah.
He's the secret to all of this. We've got to find out. Man, I'm
Riku
excited for this
talks
DLC.
like
There's
he
so
knows
many questions.
everything.
Yeah.
It's always the Nopons because I don't think we mentioned in this discussion yet, but as of just yesterday from this discussion, the second wave of DLC came out, which introduced the challenges, and we got to meet the Archsage, who's gonna pretty much be the one to guide you through that. And this Archsage is voiced by none other than the Adam Howden.
Yeah. Adam Howden's been
Does
in
this
every
mean
game.
something?
Like we've had him in. He was, of course, Shulk. In X, he's one of the voices for your avatar. In 2, of course, he's Shulk again. He's also
The Architect.
the architect.
And Klaus.
Then in
And
3,
yeah.
he's the archer Nopon. So he's tying everything together. Also, today is the day that Europe finally got the collector's edition. We the Nintendo store was offline for 3 days because it just knocked it down, but we were able to order it at last. Well, some of us were. So that's nice.
So happy for you guys. You deserve it more than we do, probably.
While we're talking about the ending and everything, that moment, I think it's incredible. When they're all running towards each other, the worlds are splitting apart. I think that's one of the best video game scenes I've seen. And the music playing in the background, I've listened to it on repeat countless times. But I just think it's so well choreographed. It's brilliant. I've never seen anything like that in a video game. I think that's just an incredible scene.
The actual visual effect of the worlds kind of like, they're not rewinding, but they're being pulled.
Yeah.
It's so cool. I've never seen like a visual kind of like that
so
before,
cool.
and it really sells the scene.
Yeah. And the desperation in all of their faces, like Tyon falls to his knees, and you can barely see it. Like it happens like on a camera cut, but he falls to his knees. You can tell they're all like devastated, all desperate to like get to each other. It's so touching.
Yeah, just the way that when you think back how they started trying to kill each other, and now they can't imagine life without each other.
Yeah.
It's such a full character arc for all of them that you've witnessed throughout this entire story, and it's very powerful. Yeah, I love that scene of just them running, but they just can't quite reach each other. I'm just like, please, just let them be together.
Yeah.
I just really love, like, I don't really enjoy how the final battle was like, if you want to cut it down to like 15 different phases and it took forever, and if you die you have to do the entire thing again for like half an hour. But it did culminate to some really fantastic moments, and just for the very final phase where you get Melia and Nia after they've been fighting, and they're also, by the way, their castles become giant mechs to fight off everything happening, which is absolutely incredible and totally in line with Xenoblade. But after that whole scene, they join you in battle, and it's just so satisfying to like it's just really hype, especially for the fans of the series, to fight with them on your team.
Yeah.
Just a really, really cool moment. But yeah, that was
Yeah, and then in the post game you get them proper. You do their quest, and then they can properly join you in the party, and that's awesome. And it changes the battle theme too.
It does, yeah. There's a bunch of there's like a lot of wholesome moments for that too. Like they talk about their experiences in the past. Uni is specifically like, oh, I feel kind of closer to you because we both have wings, and that sort of thing. It's really nice.
Oh, while we're talking about the battle theme a little bit, the chain attacks in this game, the battle theme for the chain attack is incredible, but also the bonuses you get from chain attacks are insane. There were definitely moments in Xenoblade 1 where I had to grind a little bit. I never had that in 3 though, because of these bonuses from chain attacks. They give you so damn much.
I actually have a couple criticisms here.
Oh, sure.
That said, real quick, I do think the chain attack system is my favorite of the 3 games. It's so involved and really cool, and the way it evolves over the course of the game, giving you more options, really cool stuff. We didn't even talk about their transformations into their mech forms.
Yeah, how do we not mention that? That's huge. You know, this game is so full of stuff. Things. We've been talking for like an hour, and there's so much we haven't talked about. But
I want like Gunpla style build kits of all of these, by the way. And if it doesn't happen, I'll be mad. But what I will say is that as much as I love that song and I love that system, I hated it when I was like in a really like intense scene that had emotional music in the background, and I start a chain attack and it just gets all jumpy and happy. It ruined it for me every time. There was a few times in scenes like that where I just deliberately didn't do a chain attack because it messed with the vibe of the scene for me. Like, I know it's supposed to feel empowering, but there are some cases where it shouldn't.
Yeah, I get that.
And there's only a few times in the game where they don't have the music trigger, and I think they needed to do it more often. Also, I never had a problem with grinding either. I really appreciated that from a player like quality of life standpoint. But they hurt you in a way if you're over 6 levels higher than the recommended, I think, or of the enemy you're fighting. Your characters don't get as much progression towards unlocking hero classes, and they don't tell you that. I played almost the entire game before I learned that. I was like, no wonder I wasn't unlocking anything, because I'm 30 levels higher than where I'm supposed to be right now. So I kind of wish the game had telegraphed that a little better, or at least mentioned it. And if it did mention it, I just missed it. But yeah, that was a little frustrating.
Yeah, that got me too.
At the very least, in the post game, you can level yourself down and rectify that. I just kind of wish that had been a feature before then. I don't see a reason why it shouldn't have been. But yeah, that's really all I have to say about that.
Yeah. Anything else, Daniel, or can I ask the big closing?
Let's go with the big closing finale. Let us. Okay. What do you got in your mind, John?
So we've talked about Xenoblade 3 for like an hour at this point. We all seem to think it's an incredible game, but is it the best Xenoblade Chronicles game? There's obviously a lot of factors to take into account, whether it's story, world, characters, but just like what's your gut telling you? Is this the best game in the series?
For me, I think it is. I think it's the most refined the gameplay has been, which was a big plus for me. And this has my favorite cast of characters. I felt very invested in them. I think 1 is the worst at that, personally.
Interesting.
1 has an active plot, but not active characters. 2 does not have an active plot, but it has active characters. And 3 is kind of the same way, where it's active characters, not active plot. And I prefer active character plot rather than, story-driven plot, personally. Which is interesting, because 2 is my least favorite of the 3, which is not saying I dislike it. But I think 3 balances that the best amongst them. And like I said, has the best gameplay, so I think 3's at the top for me.
What about you, Daniel?
I think as far as the gameplay goes, 3 is kind of refined what the previous games have been building up towards, even through the DLC, like Torna, taking a lot of the... taking probably the best aspects of both of them and making them into something a lot more playable for me and also for newcomers that won't get entirely lost to mechanics that are explained only once, like in Xenoblade 2, and then never show up again. As far as story goes, I think 1 probably still has the best story, overarching story of the trilogy. But 3, for me, it comes pretty close in that regard. I guess I just like dark themed things apparently in my stories. but yeah, I still enjoy 2 more than 1. But as far as the games go now, 3 might be at the top. It might be recency bias, obviously, because it just came out and you just experienced something really fantastic the first time. But I think 3 is probably at the top for me right now, as far as the best game in the series. And it might change. I mean, it might definitely change when we see whatever the DLC story is going to be for later down the line. But that's just what my gut says at this present moment right now.
I think I'm just going to echo you guys. I think One's world is outstanding. It's probably the best video game world. It's just so grounded. It's so believable. But 3's gameplay is incredibly refined. It's not just that there's more layers, because there absolutely are. Like, there's more systems, there's more things to do, more things to upgrade. But it's just more intuitive, though, and you feel a joy doing it. I think 1's system with like seeing the future with foresight, I think that was very clever. But it also doesn't have as much to stand on with its combat systems, whereas 3 has grown so much since that first game. And it's just a joy to play. It's a joy to run around and do side quests. It's just a brilliant, brilliant game. And while I've got some issues with the story pacing, I think it all comes together incredibly well. And like when the credits were rolling, I didn't think to myself like, oh, I could have done this bit a bit differently, because it paid off. It paid off in the end. I feel like the lesser moments were worth it to make this greater whole. And I'm excited for more. This DLC has a lot of potential. I think we think the Nopon's going to be God. I'm excited.
Of course.
I like what you said about the credits there, because I had a similar feeling. Do you ever just finish a game that's so good, you just sit back in your chair and you just go,
yeah,
this
is the game.
You just kind of sit and think, and you're just like, I'm going to be thinking about this game for days.
There's not a lot of games that do it to me to that degree, and of all 3 Xenoblade games, 3 is the only one that did it that hard. So yeah, it's good game.
That's our closing thought. Okay.
Just the right bit of meaty in that one, I would say.
Alright everyone, well, we've been recording in front of our live audience. If you are a patron, you can watch our discussions live, and we're going to try and do a bunch more discussions for the future, not only for new releases, which will be a lot more punctual on, but also just general topics we want to discuss. We're also going to be giving you guys a lot more early access to videos, so if you want to watch them in advance, you absolutely can. And you can also watch GVG Cast with us live, in addition to being able to submit questions and just general bonuses from the Patreon. So consider supporting us. It helps a lot. But thank you so much for listening to this, and we are sorry that it's been late, but we can finally get our thoughts out. And I think, after discussing this game with you guys, I think I appreciate it even more. Like, just getting my thoughts out there, reliving the memories. It really is one of the greats. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
See ya.
Till we meet again.